Nancy Martin is going to be our next speaker, and she is a person of great passion and high energy, and I hear great things about her from her mentees in GE. She's an electrical engineer. She has traveled to about 41 countries, so quite a world traveler, and brings in a depth and breadth of wide experiences here. And that's something I'm very much looking forward to tapping into as we enter our conversation today. As I mentioned earlier, when the microphone was not turned on, she is a generous sponsor of the Future Leaders Forum. She's also the leader of the Edison engineering program at GE. And just as a factoid that I learned, it's very impressive, the 2016 incoming class has over 50% women. And that's, I think, an incredible achievement and a narrative to share with the broader world, consistent with what we have heard in our discussions today. Without further ado, I would love to invite Nancy Martin on stage, and it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Guru. Actually, I do want to, wow, I really am. I speak all over the world. I've never had brighter lights on me than this. And all I can say is they better make me look younger. I do want to thank Guru in particular because when he asked if I wanted to speak for IEEE, you know, I know you as a technical organization, and he said, what do you want to talk about? And I said, I want to talk about the value of being imperfect. And he said, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, perfect and Six Sigma. And I said, okay, but there can be perfect products with imperfect people. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. So I think perfectionism has served you well so far. And by the way, I don't do slides, so if you see a blank slide, that's just fine. See, you know, you can just look at me, right? So it served you well so far. When you were really young, you brought home your first math test, and you got 100, and your parents put it on the refrigerator. And then you brought home your first spelling test, and that was less than 100. That's me, thank goodness for spell check. And your parents did not put that on the refrigerator. So early on, you realize getting 100 feels a lot better than other scores. So then you get into junior high, and you know you have to do well because you want to get into AP and honors high school classes. And then in high school, you know you have to do really well because you want to get into a great college. And then you're in a great college, and you have to do really well because you want a great job. And by the way, you know if you're perfect in school. If you get 100, you're perfect. And if you don't, you aren't. But then you become an adult. And it gets a lot harder, believe it or not. Because being perfect is measured differently. No career has ever been made or broken by taking a test at the end of the year. No, you have lots of people judging you, and they use different criteria, and before you know it, you're working harder and harder and harder to be perfect. And there are other things in adulthood that you can be perfect in. You could try to be the perfect partner. You can try to be a perfect parent. We even have a lunch called the Imperfect Moms Club, lamenting the fact that we are not perfect. You can even have a perfect lawn. But all of that takes its toll. Now, we already know that students work harder and harder to outdo other students. They try to get into more clubs and have more perfect grades, and the stress is almost unbearable. But it can really get away from you as an adult, and I should know, because I am a recovering perfectionist. Thank you. The battle will never be won. It's a fight every day, but I keep trying. So, what are the advantages of imperfection? Well, first, imagine a world where you're actually kind to yourself. Imagine that you take some time and you know when good enough is good enough. You don't spend 30 minutes trying to align things in a PowerPoint chart. Imagine that you look up in the sky and you start enjoying your life and you spend time with friends. And imagine this, going to sleep and not obsessing about all the mistakes you made that day. What a colossal waste of your time. But it's tough because you have to get used to doing one thing, and that's making mistakes. A lot of them. So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. So this is a couple of years ago, and I have an employee come to my office. I was working late, and he came to my office, and he knocked in my doorway, and he said, "Nancy, do you have a second?" Now, I'm an experienced manager. I've been a manager since I've been 26 years old, and I could tell this was something serious. So I dropped everything I was doing. I walk over. I ask him into my office. I close the door. I don't know what I'm about ready to hear. He sits down, and I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "I got a B- on my test. I think I'm going to get a B in the class. There's no way I can bring it up to an A." Now, I have no idea what the look on my face was. He's a Princeton grad. He was talking to somebody that once got a 23 on a theoretical calculus exam. And I mean 23 out of 100, not 23 out of 25. So that existential life crisis he was having was not relatable to me. Turns out it was going to be his first B. And I told him, as his manager's manager, he had to get a C in the class and get a grip on reality. You know, if you take away the opportunity to fail, you only have one option left, and that's to be perfect. That's a heck of a burden. You know, in order for us to make new products or innovate or even be creative, there are so many iterations that you need to go through, and a lot of that includes mistakes and failures. I think Dyson did it over 1,000 times. So now I want to tell you another story, and this is like 15 years ago. So I'm on an international trip with a whole bunch of colleagues, about 11 of them, and this is a 2-week trip. And for some reason on the last night, well, I think it was because we were at a bar, but for some reason we decided it was a really good idea for us to go around and tell each other our biggest regrets. Okay, again, maybe not the best idea, but as we go around the table, something struck me. The regrets were not about what people did. The regrets were about things they did not do. They didn't sing in a band. They didn't try out for a sports team, and for 2 of them. They did not ask the girl who was in their math class for 4 years out on a date. I know it's really hard to put yourself out there. There's fear of rejection. There's fear of failure. But the alternative is sitting around the table asking yourself, what if? And you've got to take risks in order to grow. And sometimes it works. And sometimes it doesn't. If you take a look, what's useful about making mistakes even? And there are lots of reasons to make mistakes, except there's one that's the most important one. And that is making a mistake so you know you're going to live through it. Perfection does not build character. Recovering does. You know, they don't teach you that in school. And it's probably one of the single biggest things that is important in your life. You know, life has a way of pushing you down. You know, people push you down, you fall down because you did something stupid. And it doesn't matter why you're down there, as long as you get back up fast. I forgot to do that slide, so I'm going to keep going. And that was a nice picture, but that was for the last story. See, I don't use slides, as you can tell. I don't like to align things in PowerPoint. Well, now it's time for me to tell you one of my big embarrassing failures. And I have a lot to choose from because I'm an impulsive person and I put myself out there a whole lot. So again, this is a while ago, and we have this learning center called Crotonville, and it's a big deal in GE. It's where people go that are looking to become managers. And so for about a year and a half, I was one of the most popular speakers in an executive series. So we'd have about 70 executives, and I would go and talk about technology. And I would make it fun and easy to understand. And very often, I would get 5 out of 5 on my evaluation. That was normal, so I was thinking I was pretty hot stuff. And so then they said, you know what, why don't you pick a different topic? Why don't you talk about innovation? And so I said, sure, no problem, pretty confident. So I did, and I went down, I delivered it to the same class, different executives, and I thought I did pretty well. And then they sent me the evaluations. And I opened it. And I saw 1s. Now at first I thought, hey, maybe they thought 1 was good. People make that mistake. And then I read the comments, and I'm like, nope. No, they knew 1 was bad. I was mortified, embarrassed, and super bummed out for a week. Okay, no, way longer than a week. As a matter of fact, I still remember it. It was 15 years ago. I've recovered, but, I don't think I even told my husband that night. I was so embarrassed. And this is what it looked like. So this is the class. And for those of you that aren't on the speaking circuit, these are bad scores. So something interesting happened. One of the very few people that gave me a 5 said, I loved it. Can you come down and give it at Crotonville? But it was for a different class. And so now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm paralyzed with fear. They asked me to do this, but I desperately wanted a second chance. So I culled through all of the comments, and I really changed the tone, because it really wasn't the content, but they really didn't like the tone in which I gave it. And so I practiced. I go down, I give it, and it was successful. Well, then there was somebody in the marketing group, and I ended up giving it for our chief marketing officer down in New York City. And that went well. And then, stranger than that, I ended up giving it to one of our biggest customers in power, which led to them inviting me to Paris. Now, those are the unintended consequences. But there were consequences to that failure. After 18 months of being the most popular speaker in that class, I have never, ever been invited back to speak. So, how do you recover? So I'm going to tell you a story about how I taught my daughter to go through this. My daughter's name is Jill. She was in 4th grade. She'd come home and she was sad. And so I had to quickly come up with, how do I help her recover? And through that, I've learned how to recover myself. So the first thing I told her, she's 4th grade, so 9, You cry your eyes out. You make a plan, and then you watch Full House. It worked. We still do that. In adult terms, it's similar. You work through whatever emotions you have. You put a plan together and you execute. And then you move on. Now, I don't want to mislead you and say all mistakes are good. Sometimes the consequences are too great. Sometimes there is no upside, and sometimes there's nothing you can learn. So, you just have to muster everything inside you and just move on. Now, I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts before we get to some questions and answers. So, I'm going to tell you another story about my daughter. So she's not in 4th grade anymore. She's in college, and she's studying physics. But when it's like she was in her senior year in high school, and I went up to her about 5 months before she left, and I was just feeling very nostalgic and very sad about her leaving, and I had the best idea. I went up to her and I said, Jill, I'm going to write you a book of advice from your mom, and I'm going to publish it and put it in a book. And she said, yeah, you're not going to do that. And she says, as a matter of fact, you had 18 years to give it your best shot. So you only get one piece of advice when you drop me off. Now, you don't know who I am, but that's pretty hard. So, and I'm really glad I had 5 months. So I drop her off in Washington, D.C. I'm sad, I'm emotional, she's happy, but I give her a big hug, and she says, okay, you can give me that one piece of advice. And this was it. Don't die. Everything else you can come back from. Which is going to be the name of my book, by the way. I'm writing it. My daughter won't buy it, but the rest of you will, right? Okay. I think when you're young, you want your life to fall in place right away. You want the perfect job. You want to be with people that get who you are at your core. You want to make a lot of money. But life doesn't work that way because it's just so terribly messy. You can't just jump into the life you want. You really have to build it one experience at a time. And that is going to involve a lot of mistakes. Thank you.
That's what you call antioxidants for career development. You have just given me a psychic boost personally. I feel like it's okay to make mistakes, even on stage. I'm not talking about my microphone debacle, but life in general.
Well, my mistakes, I could go on and on. Yeah.
But Nancy, how do you create a safe space where people are encouraged to fail?
Well, I think that is a leadership trait, and I think the first thing you have to understand is you've got to be open with your own mistakes. I don't think I admitted my mistakes until about 10 years ago, and I'll tell you a quick story. Jeff Immelt is our CEO, and for whatever reason, I still don't know why, I was invited to go to a game, I think actually down in Alabama, so that's not Louisiana, I know. But and so I'm in his private plane with him and talking for a long time, and I think I logged about 16 hours of one-on-one time with our CEO. I had quite a headache. But one thing that was really interesting, because we talked about everything, he's a talker, I'm a talker, and he told me 3 things that he did wrong in GE. These are like big things. He was just talking to me. And he goes, yeah, I made this mistake. And I started asking him. And it really made me reflect. I said, I don't even think about the mistakes I made. And here's a CEO, and he was talking to me. And once he did that, I said, you know what? I need to tell people that I make mistakes. I need to reflect more, and I need to be open. And I think if you're open with your own mistakes, and you can't overreact when people make mistakes. In my group, we say it's not about perfection, it's about the recovery. And if you have that philosophy, I think it allows people to be normal, which is human.
I wish our politicians were this way, but let's turn the lights on, and I think we can take a couple of questions. Please tell us a little bit about the Edison program.
Oh, sure. So the Edison program has been around since 1922, and so it's old. We have gone through definitely a re-energized group. I have run the program for about 10 years, but I really got a lot of support lately. We have about 1,000 Edisons around the world. They're in 60 locations, which is why I travel all the time, and I just visited my 41st country. Some of that's personal, and some of that is professional. So we did just hire 50% women in the class. I think everyone thought that couldn't be done. I thought it's a short putt. Our program is that good that there's a long line of people that want to be in it. So you have rotations, you go through classes, you get your master's degree. That's what I did. I'm an Edison engineer. And then we do have some fun things like a summit where I bring people in their final year together. And then we also, I know they're talking about attrition, but our attrition rate or our retention rate is actually higher for women than men, although it's all spectacular. It's about 80% of the people stay in GE even within 5 years. So
looks like Edison is a great role model to teach us about failure here. We hear so much
that's
about some
right.
of them myths,
That's
some
right.
of them facts, but I think overall, I think it's a very good role model. We can see how many people are at the microphone.
Okay.
Let's take one from here and go from here.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Soumya. First of all, I want to thank you for such a terrific talk. It was really inspiring, and I would give you a 5 all the time.
Okay.
And my question basically is about how you would correlate imperfections and accountability that is perceived by coworkers. A lot of times people think that you're more accountable because you do not have flaws or you're never making mistakes and that they can rely on you based on that. So what do you think about overcoming that kind of pressure?
Well, I think a lot of the pressure we put on ourselves is just that. It's things that we put on ourselves. I think, again, with me, I am an impulsive person, and so I have made mistakes and then had to recover, whether it's in the moment or in a week or in a month or in a year. I mean, the time spans are much longer for people that are older, but I think the idea is if you know you can recover, you don't have to be perfect, but you don't know that yet. And actually, I look around the room, and you're really young, and I think most of you really don't know that you can recover. And some of you do have 4 O's, and I always say, get a B, and go wild. So you're accountable if you can fix something. And if you don't freak out, perfectionists, again, I am one, I would spend time working on like stupid stuff, like aligning PowerPoint. You notice I don't even do it anymore. And so you've got to really pick what's important, and very, very few things in life are that important. Very few. You don't know that either. You think everything is, but it isn't. And so if you can kind of sort through that, that will help. But accountability, for sure, is about eventually getting it right. It's not about getting it right necessarily the first time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Next.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle. I'm from Drexel University, and I was wondering if, as you said, like sometimes it can take a day, sometimes it takes a week, et cetera, to recover. How do you continue to move forward, like in your job or with your life, while you're still in that process of recovering?
Okay, great idea. I mean, that's great. So I do, and I had something that happened just recently, a few months ago, that really turned me on my heels. I mean, and it upset me, and it was always in the front of my mind. But I continue to do a couple of things, like go through the motions. Like I run, so whatever that is, I run a lot. I sleep, something that none of you do. But I have come to find that 8 hours of sleep makes the world a much nicer place than, I don't know, going to bed at 1 and waking up at 6, or again, whatever you do. And even if I can't sleep, I have learned that I'll listen to a book on my iPhone, and I fall asleep within 15 minutes. I really try to concentrate on that versus the obsessing. I think the real problem is the obsessing piece. I'm an obsessor. What I found out is I'm guessing 99% of you are also obsessors. And so the idea is to really try to distract yourself and then put things down on a piece of paper. If you're obsessing, then write it down. And get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper. And what I think I now know is, even when I was going through this really tough time, tough times don't last. They don't. And so you got to keep telling yourself that.
Very good. We have 4 questions. Make them short and sweet.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Cynthia from University of Michigan. I just wanted to, I really enjoyed the talk, and I wanted to ask you if you have any tips for admitting that you've made a mistake.
I think it's easier for a leader to admit they made a mistake than a new employee, actually. So I'm going to be honest, right? So I think that you can start. I do think you have to find a safe place, right? So in corporate America, some people it's safe to do, and some people it's not. So I don't want you to commit political suicide and just going around going, I made a mistake, because eventually that's your brand, and so, you want to be careful about that. I think when you first start your career, you don't announce it to the world. Announce it to a mentee or mentor and say, hey, I made this mistake, and then what would you do?
Very good question.
Okay.
Next.
Thank you.
I'll try to answer them quickly.
Nice talk. Let me frame this very well. If I worked in your group and you give me chance to fail, for how long would you tolerate my failures? Especially if it affects your group dynamics and productivity.
Yeah, I mean, I am nice and I am funny, as I always tell people, but I'm tough. So just because I can tolerate failures, it doesn't mean that you can never succeed. And so I think that's a balance of success and failures, for sure. And so I don't know what the time limit is. I think in my case, I've been a leader for over 30 years. And you can kind of get a gut feel whether it's a problem of skills, passion. And if you don't have the skills, then we probably do have to move you on. Yes.
Hello, my name is Beatriz. I am from Panama. I'm representing Purdue University. I am a perfectionist too, and
The first step is admitting it.
Yes.
So,
I'm very perfectionist. Actually, I focus a lot on the future, which brings anxiety, and focus a lot on the past, which brings depression. So, I wanted to ask you, how do you let things go and focus more in the present?
that takes practice, a lot of practice. Last night, I was going to go home and rewrite some of this pitch after we did the talks. And I said, well, no, I've never been on the Mississippi. And so I forced myself to go there and enjoy it. And if any of you saw me, I spent some time talking, but I sat on the back of the boat for about a half an hour and I just looked at it. Mm-hmm. And I did, and you can even talk to yourself and say, I'm on the Mississippi. Mm-hmm. I was in Panama in February on vacation, and you know what I said almost the whole time? Can't believe I'm on the Panama Canal. What an engineering marvel. So you've got to start talking to yourself, and it's a practice. I think that people think you don't have to practice being happy. You do. Mm-hmm. I practice being happy. I get up every morning, I go to McDonald's. If I'm not happy to the people that just gave me my Diet Coke, then I know I better shape up before I get to work. It takes practice. And so start with little pieces, and it's called mindfulness. Look it up, and I would say, I've seen that piece of paper. Oh, there's a piece of paper there. It's very surreal, but you know.
We'll fix this.
But yeah, but it's. Yeah. But like, I don't understand why people don't
Thank
think. Thank you. But I don't understand why people don't. They think you have to practice sports and that you have to practice the piano and you have to practice in school. But they don't think you have to practice being happy or being present. And that's one of the hardest things of all. Practice, practice, practice. And if you need to, get a teacher. And if you're depressed, always get help. I have been depressed in my life before, and it was a pretty rough go of it, and I don't want to go back. So always definitely feel like you can reach out. Perfectionism does lead to depression. That was why I'm recovering now.
So what we're looking at is a fusion of Thomas Edison and Buddha. So good luck. Final question.
Yeah.
Yes, hi. So my name is Ocean Boulay from
Ocean.
Region 3. That was fantastic. Your energy is infectious. So I was wondering, so I guess specifically for GE, what do you think GE is doing to, this is kind of to tag on our forum before the break of kind of women in the workplace and that pipeline process. How is it that GE is able to keep those women integrated and vital to the company and making them feel important? What is GE doing, I guess, that's different than what other companies are doing?
Well, I still think it's hit and miss, right? GE is a huge company. If you have the right manager, like anything, isn't it great? And if you have a horrible manager, isn't it horrible? And so I think so I just want to be honest about that. I think it's in pockets. I think the thing we do with Edison, we've changed the vision. When I hire you, the 1,000 people, there are two things I want you to do. One, I want you to perform. Learn how to become an engineer. But the second thing, and this is the really unique thing, and this is our slogan, Edison's transforming engineering. So when you come in at 23, I no longer want you to just be an engineer. I want you to help me change the culture. I'm incredibly passionate about making a more inclusive and actually just a nicer environment. And it's a passion that I wake up with every morning, and I get help from 1,000 people. And I think when you come to work and you feel like, hey, I'm not just becoming an engineer, but I really am going to change GE for the better, and you have a leader telling you that every day, I think that probably helps keep you in place. And you can always have bad days, right? You're driving home from, I hate work. And next day I say, hey, help me change the company. Okay, I love work. I hate work. I love work. It's a lot of ups and downs when you're 20. I wouldn't go back. But I really do believe that we have some really phenomenal role models. Definitely, I was the only engineering female manager, engineering for so long, and it was so hard. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't ever want it to be as hard for you as it was for me. I don't want you to suffer. So I think there's a lot of people like me in our company, for sure.
Nancy,
Absolutely.
bravo.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.